That was a very trying time in your relationship. And that was a period that after losing your first child, and you continue to hope and have courage at those moments. Jimmy, walk us through that period, if you may, and how did that loss reshape your understanding of God? Not just in theory, but in the everyday decisions you made, even after, your wife became pregnant again.
I don't know, DJ, if the loss of our first child, it definitely impacted my wife significantly. If I'm being transparent, I don't know if it affected me as much as it affected her, because the baby is inside of her. She's carrying it. She's feeling that baby kick. We had that baby out of wedlock. And what we did not realize at the time is that Tashar, she has an incompetent cervix. So the baby would come along after we lost our first one. A procedure wasn't done for our second one. She would have lost the second one. She would have lost the third one. And so I look at the loss of our first child as God's grace giving us insight on the condition of my wife's body to prevent us from losing future children. I always think, or I often wonder, what life would be like if he was here. I do think about that. I also think about what the dynamic of the relationship would be between him and his sisters and his baby brother. Those are things that we do think about and that we do talk about. But at the end of the day, I know that when I pass, that I'll get to see him. We'll get to see him. And when we get to heaven. But it was a blessing to have him, in the sense that it allowed us to figure out what was wrong with Tashar's system and body, so that she could have more kids.
Wow. As difficult as those moments were, those seasons of your life, where the miracle happened and you have other children, to the point that you name one of your daughters that makes prophecy and purpose, right? Looking back now, seeing your other children, the joy of receiving them into this earth and how fragile they were, how did that, shape you in your journey of life, and also what it truly means to be a steward of a life entrusted to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. When my first daughter was born, and then shortly thereafter we had our second daughter, there was just something on the inside of me. There was a determination just on the inside of me to create a better life. I really wanted to be better to my children than my parents were to me. That's what I want. That's what I wanted to be. Everything that I was doing, or everything that I've done up to this point, I just always have them in the back of my mind. I always have them in the back of my mind. I want them to have the best. I want them to be the best versions of themselves. And I've had to evolve as a father. I've had to learn. I've had to have those conversations, those hard conversations with my kids. Realizing, especially after that parenting class I talked about, realizing that the way that I parented was not the most effective way, and just sitting down with all three of them and having that difficult conversation to say, you know what, I realize as a father I've made some mistakes, and just letting them know that I am here for them, and that the reason why I worked as hard as I did, it was because I was trying to prepare a life for them that I didn't necessarily have, growing up.
Now, let's talk about some transitions in your life. You mentioned that one of your first real job was working as a mail delivery person for the United States Post Office, right? And over the years, you had a degree in business administration and all of that. You work at, in the corporate America at different positions. Let's take a deep dive into when you were a letter carrier or delivering letter, and that you had this $40,000 of debt. What was your thought, that you never said out back then? Even though you said that, yeah, debt buy things, but investment build equity.
Yeah.
When did that stop being a financial concept, but now start becoming a personal awakening for you?
Yeah. So, when I got my first apartment, so growing up, I always saw my mom and dad pull out credit cards. I just saw it. Now, whether it was a debit card or a credit card, I don't know. But I always saw plastic. I always saw plastic in their hand, especially Discover. He might be a platinum member with Discover. I don't know, but he always had a Discover card, and I will always see them use plastic. Now, Tashara, on the other hand, her parents use cash for everything. She never saw them use credit cards. And so when I got my first apartment, my mom took me to Sears and she said, we need to get you a washer, we need to get you a dryer, we need to get you a vacuum cleaner, and there's some other household items that you need. We're going to open you up a Sears charge card.
On a credit card?
On a credit card. Woo. And that's what we did.
Wow.
That's what, $2,500. And I didn't think anything about it because DJ, my monthly payment was $25 a month. I was cool with that. I was like, man, this is cool. I can buy all this stuff right now and I only have to pay $25 a month. This is all right. And in 1995, $12.70 something cents an hour. That was a lot of money back then because I think minimum wage was $4.25. And so I'm making good money as a letter carrier, and I'm getting all these credit card applications coming in the mail, and I'm filling them out, and I'm using my credit cards just to buy stuff. And I buy 2 cars, and then all of a sudden, I lose that job at the post office. Whoa. And it's like, oh wow, I got $50,000 in debt, and I don't have a job. I'm not making enough money even to make the minimum payments now that I have to make on all this debt. When we moved here and started listening to Dave Ramsey, and we just started tackling debt and getting rid of debt. And our credit was so messed up because I had 2 car repossessions. We were just financially, we were just messed up. And, looking good on the outside, but man, on the inside, boy, we was a mess. It was a mess. And so it was just a financial mess. And so, started listening to Dave Ramsey and worked on a plan of getting rid of that debt. And Tashar was able to come home, and we started saving money and so on and so forth. And it wasn't, Ted, let's see, 2010. Yeah, it was 2010 is when I got laid off from Nextel. Sprint Nextel. I worked for them for 13 years. And so I got laid off with them. And by that time I had my master's degree. I figured it wouldn't take no time to get a job or find a job. But, in 2008, the economy tanked. In 2010, nobody was really hiring. I couldn't find a job to replace my income. And so all the money we saved in our savings, 401k, investments, over a 2-year period, I used that to pay our mortgage, pay our bills. And then when that started running out, I had to go back using credit cards. Yeah. So, hindsight 2020, I definitely would have done some things differently then.
Okay.
It kind of is what it is. And so I finally ended up getting a job, working for ACA. I felt like I was on a trajectory to make it to a O program, to a suite, the COO programs. And so I figured that's where I was going to land. I was going to be a COO within ACA. And during that time, I was spending so much time away from home and at work that my son was acting up in school, and I was having to leave work and address issues with him. And I just remember that God saying to me at church, I was sitting in church, and he told me, he says, you can continue to stay with this organization and you will prosper financially.
Okay, which is good.
Which is good. And then he said, but you'll lose your son.
Whoa, that is not good.
That's not good. And so I go home, I'm upset with God because I'm trying to get us out of a financial situation because I hadn't worked for 2 years. And I'm like, Lord, what do you want me to do? I felt led to call a builder I done some freelance work with in 2011 and 12. And I asked them if they had hired anybody to replace doing what I was doing for them. And they told me they hadn't, and we ended up working something out to where in 2016 I went to go work for the builder. They sent me to get my real estate license, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Before we dive into real estate, I'm curious to know that word that you hear, that if you continue to climb this corporate ladder, you will lose your son, even though you will make more money. What was it about that message that you really fear?
Looking back at that moment and instance today, I believe my son would have committed suicide. I believe he would have. Me making the transition when I did, even though I feel like it was too late, it was the right time. I probably should have left a lot sooner. When I got laid off in 2010, I should have went right into real estate then, and I didn't. And I was encouraged to do real estate then, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to be riding around showing people houses, working weekends, open houses. I mean, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do all that. I wasn't ready for that. And so I decided to try to do my own business and do other things over that 2-year period that just never panned out. It just never worked out. But I believe that if I had stayed with HCA during that time, I believe my son probably would have committed suicide.
Wow. Wow. Somebody out there watching this video that they are struggling or they are ambitious to climb the corporate ladder. They are making more money, but their home is in jeopardy because they are not present at home.
Mm-hmm.
What would you want them to hear from your story that can be of help to them?
The one thing that I can say, DJ, is that as a father, when you're not present, it makes a huge difference in the home. As a father, when you are present, it makes a huge difference in the home. One has better benefits than the other. And if you're so career minded and so career focused to where you allow your work to consume your time and your energy, your children will fight and find the attention that they're getting from somewhere else. And you can write a check for that, put it in the mail, and it'll get cash one day. If you're so focused on your career to where your career is taking you away or taking you out of the home to where you're not present, the attention that your kids are looking for, they'll find it somewhere else. And it'll happen just like that. up under your nose. You won't even know it.
And that attention will most likely be destructive to them.
That is correct. That's the one thing that I wish I had known, or I wish somebody had shared that with me. But I'm glad that while I was sitting in that meeting at church, that I listened to the Holy Spirit minister to me and say, "Hey, you're on a roll financially. You're moving up. You'll get into this L program, but there's going to be a consequence." If my son, whether he had committed suicide or gotten into something that took his life, I'm not exactly sure emotionally how I could live, or I'm not saying how I could live with that, but the pain in my wife and I's heart right now would be so significant to where it would be hard to be motivated in this life, especially because I knew that I had an opportunity to change it, to impact his trajectory, but instead I chose to go a different route.
Well, but thank God that you were able to make that switch before it was too late. Good. Now, talking about real estate, you work for one of the nice builder building quality homes here in the Nashville area. As a builder, as a representative of a builder, what will you say to a buyer out there that wants to buy a house, but they don't want an agent to represent them?
They don't want an agent to represent them?
Or they allow the builder's agent to sweet talk them that you don't need an agent to represent you as a buyer.
Yeah.
What risk do they stand? What are the disadvantages of such a decision?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay, I'm listening.
Let's just say you're a professional baseball player.
Okay.
All right. And the organization has laid a contract before you.
Okay.
And you decide that you don't want any representation whatsoever on negotiating or writing this contract. You signed a contract, but then on the back end of that contract, there's so many clauses and things that you didn't even realize or you didn't even understand. And now you're having buyer's remorse, or you're having contract remorse because you're like, oh man, I should have gotten some help on this. Here's the thing. In real estate, I know NAR came out with their settlement and whatnot, but in real estate, 99% of the time, if you're buying a house, that builder or that seller is paying a buyer's commission. They are. They have to. And if they're not paying a buyer's commission, their house will never get sold. And if you want to walk into a deal to where you're going to buy a house from a builder or buy a house from a seller, and you don't want to be represented, that's not saving you any money.
But what I've heard some buyers will say is that, well, the builder's agent said, well, if you don't use an agent, we will give you free refrigerator or free window blind.
They'll probably give it to you anyway. In today's market, they would probably give it to you.
Cost is that? What I mean is, at what cost will that be to that buyer not using an agent to represent them because they want to get a free refrigerator?
It could be a huge financial cost. Listen, as an agent, I can walk into a house and I can see things.
Definitely.
I can pick up things that are going to be a problem. And as your agent, it's my responsibility to help guide you and make you aware of these problems and make you aware of these things. When I walk into a house, I had a buyer that I was working with, and we went and looked at a house in Columbia, and they were okay with the house, but you could tell that the owner of that house did some things to cover some things up. I could just tell. And as a buyer's agent, I can help you filter through some of that You know, if there are settlement issues on that house, I know how to find those settlement issues. I know how to determine and assess whether or not those settlement issues are a big deal or if they're not a big deal, you know, water up under the crawl space or, piping issues, your windows opening up and down, looking around the sill of the window. There's just so many, from a buyer's agent perspective, when you're working with a buyer's agent, your agent should have a lot of knowledge about just general construction that they bring to the table that they can help you make a good decision as to whether or not you want to buy this house or not. I've been with buyers. I will tell you, I had buyers. They wanted to buy this house. They had a home inspection done on it, and there was mold in the crawl space on the floor. Mold in the crawl space on the floor joists. There was a drainage issue around the house. Now, I didn't have any problem at all with the house because I'm getting the house at a deal.
Okay.
So I'm getting the house at a deal. I'm getting the house for $384. Comps around the area are $425. So personally, if I can get the sellers to address this, I'm gonna go ahead and I personally would make the investment. My buyers, they were terrified. They're like, we've had this issue before in the past. So now you're working with buyers who have experienced an issue in the past, and now that issue in the past has come up in this house, and so it's driven them away from that home. And as a buyer's agent, I mean, I can't force you to buy this. All I can do is give you good information that will help you make a good decision as to whether or not you should purchase this home. When it comes to contract language, the things that people put in contracts, you want to have somebody who's knowledgeable about contract language and the things that are written in contracts so that you understand, or you have a full understanding as to what you're getting yourself into.
All right. Now, talking about land, you are the landman, right?
The land man. Jimmy J and
Said, don't buy a land in Nashville and metro area without talking to the landman. So you have this app that you build, right? The Tennessee Soil App. What are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve with that app?
So in Tennessee, there's over 400 different types of soil in the state of Tennessee. I want to say 5 years ago, right when the market was on a climb, there was a guy that called the office. He bought some land off of A40. He bought 30 acres of land off of A40. Paid at that time, I think it was like $400,000 for it, and wanted to build a house on it. And I go to the soil map to look at the land that he bought, and then the soil map says it's like 95% of it is like Gladeville rock. It's rock. Wow. And so, I share with the guy, I said, hey, I don't know if you're going to find any soil on this property that's going to allow you to build a house. And he's like, man, I got 30 acres. I'm sure they can find something. So he spent $15,000 to have a soil scientist go out on this property every square inch to find enough soil for a 4-bedroom perk site. And he found enough soil for a 1-bedroom. So now he's got 30 acres of land that he paid $400,000 for, and he can't use it. And so the purpose of the Tennessee Soils app is to really help the consumer and real estate agents understand that when you're looking at a piece of property and you know what kind of soil is on that property, there's really nothing that tells you whether or not that soil is good soil for building a house.
Okay.
And so that's what my app does. It helps give exposure to understanding the soils, the good soils that are good for developing and building houses in Tennessee.
So how can someone, get access to this app?
Is right now, I believe it's we're launching a website in January, but it'll be the tnsoils.com.
Okay.
So TN for Tennessee soils.com. And we're actually going to be doing either a 14-day or 30-day trial. And there's some classes that I've done on YouTube that I need to sync with the website so that people can have a little bit more understanding on it, not just a consumer, but really the ad was built for really realtors. There's over 30,000 real estate agents in the state of Tennessee. So just having some basic understanding of how to find the soil, but once you find it, how do you know if this soil is any good before you advise your client to invest money for a soil scientist to go out there? Because a soil scientist, depending on how big the track is, can run you anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000, just depending on what you're looking for.
So your hub could actually save people money before they approach a soil scientist to do a soil test.
It helps them make an informed decision.
Okay.
Yeah. Because if you're buying a piece of property and you see that there's 10 different types of soil on that property, but then you see that out of the 10 soils, 9 of them are really bad, and there's only one good soil on there, potentially that one good soil might be bad too.
Yeah.
But you need to know, okay, this property has 10 different types of soil on it. Most of them are bad. Do I really want to spend the money necessary to determine whether or not the soils are good to build and develop?
Okay, nice. So on land acquisition generally, what are the advantage of somebody say, well, I just want to invest in land, how will somebody go about that? And will you say that investing in land is a good way of investment to build equity, and why?
Well, the cost of land there is no more. God's not making any more land. Hey, the land is what it is, right? And so if you live in the Nashville area, you know that we are busting out of the seams in growth. A lot of people are moving out. And so, within the Davidson County area, if you can get land 2 counties over, 1 county, 2 counties over outside of Davidson County, and you don't have to have your money immediately and you want to just hold on to it and invest it. But I also advise people just to do some research and some analysis, because you can go to chamber websites and you can go to municipality websites and figure out where their growth boundaries are to see where the next potential growth spot or growth area is going to be. And that's where you want to start focusing in on and start buying land is where's the next growth area or growth spot in this particular county going to be. And that's where you want to try to focus on picking up some land if you can.
So how can someone predict or determine where the growth spots will be?
You can look at trends. You can look at population trends. So you can utilize the census. You can also utilize real tracks. So you can go into real tracks and you can run for example, you can run an analysis for Coffee County, and you can see, okay, in Coffee County in 2022, there were 300 new builds. All right. In 2023, there were 400 new builds. In 2024, there were so many builds. And then 2025, you see there were 2,000 new builds. And you're like, oh, okay, something's going on in Coffee County, because I'm looking at the trajectory and I'm seeing a large jump from one year to the next, which is telling me, okay, this is an area where people are moving to.
Okay, good. That is a very valuable information right there. Take me back to that night when your body was carrying what your words could not. When you were grinding your teeth in your sleep, waking up sore, and that your mind was fighting to control, but your heart was afraid to release.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about that depression.
Yeah.
Walk me through that time, and if you may, what is it that people assume about you during that season that was completely untrue?
DJ. Man. Well, you know, they say faith it until you make it. I think a lot of people assumed that we were doing well. So when I got laid off in 2010, went through our 401k and savings. The rest of 2010, half of 2011, just struggling figuring out how to make ends meet. And my worry consumed me so much to where it created anxiety, to where I was going to bed at night and I was gnashing my teeth, and I wake up in the morning and the back of my tongue would be cut because I was grinding on my tongue. And I will tell you that I don't, because at the time, I mean, I just didn't know how we were going to make it, financially. I'm working at Publix. We're doing what we can. My wife has gone back to work, so we're doing what we can just to just to maintain. It got so bad that I would go outside. So I was reading in Middle Tennessee, their magazine that they send out every month. So I was reading in Middle Tennessee magazine how the power source, even though you're not using your lights, that there's a current that still runs through at the breaker. And so if you could eliminate that current, it would save you like so many cents an hour or something like that. And I was going outside, DJ. I was shutting breakers off to the washing machine, the dryer, the stove, the lights we weren't using. And then when we needed to cook, I'd go out and I cut the breaker on so that we could cook. I don't know how much money that saved. I mean, we were trying to save every penny we could save. And I'll never forget this. My neighbor across the street, he came over, he knocked on our door. He said, James, he said, is everything okay? I said, Pete, yeah, everything is fine. He said, yeah. He said, Carol and we were wondering about y'all. He says, cause I see you going outside every day, flipping breakers. And I said, yeah, I'm just trying to save some money. And he said, well, he said, Carol and I, we've been praying. So let me just say this. My wife and I just have a casual relationship with Carol and Pete across the street. I've never been in their house. They never been in mine. We talk to each other coming and going, coming and passing. And we just, and there might be times throughout the year where we'll just sit out and we'll just talk in the street and just catch up and whatnot. But he tells me, he says, because that month I was so stressed out because I didn't have the $1,200 that I needed to pay the mortgage, and I didn't know where the money was going to come from. And he walked over, he says, Carol and I have been praying, and the Lord told me to give this to you. I didn't even know they were Christians.
Wow.
And he handed me an envelope, and I opened it up, and it was at exactly $1,200.
Exact amount?
Exact amount to pay our mortgage.
Wow.
And I think in that moment, I broke down, and I mean, I just broke down in tears, and I was just emotionally distraught just because of, at the time I just was like, this can only be the goodness of God. And I think at that moment I started to realize that God's got our back. If he can speak to people that we don't even have really a relationship with, to write a check that's going to cover our mortgage and our mortgage get paid, he's got our back. People say he don't come when you want him, but he shows up right on time. So yeah, I just, just just how everything transpired with me getting a job, and how I got it and how I got the job at ACA. But oddly during that time, my wife was an encourager. She would write scriptures and she'd post them on the mirror. She'd post them on the bed. And I look at her like she's crazy. Because at the end of the day, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, these scriptures and being happy is not paying the bills right now, I'm not sure how we're going to pay our mortgage. I'm not sure how we're going to make the car note. I'm not sure how we're going to, pay these credit card bills and groceries and so on and so forth. But it was a struggle. But during that time, most people who knew us probably assumed that we were okay. There was only a select few people that knew we were struggling.
Wow. Well, on the outside, people thought you were okay,
Yeah,
but you were struggling.
struggling.
And that moment when your neighbor that you don't even have a deep relationship with came to present with the exact amount of money that you need to pay your mortgage, that moment sparked hope when despair have every reason to win. Interesting.
Yes.
And that belief, make a big shift in your relationship and in your relationship with God in that season of your life.
Yeah. I believe there's through life, through my life in particularly, there are milestones. You know, I tell people all the time, no one is exempt from problems.
Okay.
As long as you keep living, problems will come.
Ooh.
They're gonna come.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, problems will come. It's just the measure of how you handle those problems. And I just believe that the problems that we've encountered have allowed us to build up our faith muscles, to where we just we feel, we know, we believe, and we trust that God's going to take care of us.
Okay. As I begin to wrap up, a couple of questions on marriage. You mentioned something along the line that marriage is not it's not a contract, rather it is a covenant relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And that it means loving and serving the other person, even when the other person does not change.
Correct.
Right. So how do you do that without losing yourself or becoming resentful?
This might sound cliche, but it's where you keep your focus. I mean, wherever the mind flows, that's where the power goes. You just have to keep your focus. If I feel like, my wife is not doing her part, or she's lacking on some things, I can't allow that to impact how I treat her and how I deal with her. Now, I'm not saying that's easy, because it's not, but it's a matter of maturity, emotional and spiritual maturity. At the end of the day, we're all selfish. Every single one of us, we're selfish. And so it's a constant dying to self that you have to do.
Constant dying to self.
Dying of self. There's things that my wife enjoys and she loves to do, and I can't stand it. I just can't. My wife is an artsy person. She's in the arts. My wife likes building tables and getting creative and doing things. And, earlier this year, I come home, I'm pulling into the driveway. She gone to Lowe's or Home Depot and she bought some wood, and she had my saw out, and I pull into the driveway. I'm like, like, what is going on? She's like, I'm getting ready to make a table. I'm like, you're getting ready to what? She's like, I'm getting ready to make a table and you're going to help me. And at that moment, there's two ways I could have responded. Because it's like, can we do this another time? I'm tired. Or I can change my clothes, come outside, help her with the table, and in doing so, she feels valued. Does that make sense? So me doing something that I really don't have an interest in doing, I'm doing it because I want her to feel valued. I want her to feel important. And I'm certain there's things that she does for me that she doesn't like sports. She doesn't like going to the football games. She doesn't like going to baseball games, but she'll do it because it's something that's important to me. And she does it because she sees it as adding value to me. So there's constantly going to be a give and a take in the relationship.
Earlier on, we talked about how the power of our words can either be damaging or be constructive. You've also mentioned how, our facial expression without even saying anything, the silence and the body language can still cause as much hurt and wound just as deeply as words. When did you realize that?
That's something that I'm still trying to work on, DJ. I mean, there are people that will read into me, and my wife says this all the time. She's like, "You gotta fix your face." I'm like, what are you talking about? She she's like, "You look like you weren't interested." I'm like, "No, I was very interested in what he was saying. It had my mind in a certain place." And she's like, "Well, I couldn't tell." She's like, "Your facial expression." And I said, "You can't look at my facial expression." And she's like, "Well, other people don't know that." I'm like, "Well, how do you fix your face how do I know when to fix my face?" But people will read my face sometimes and they'll be like, "What is going on in his mind?" And my wife is, I mean, and then I think that's just something that I'm working on, and I'll probably continue to be working on that for the rest of my life, is because people will look at my facial expression sometimes and they're like, "What is going on with him?" Or "What's wrong?" And there's nothing wrong, guys. I'm thinking, or something has been said that has captivated my thought process, and it's caused the wheels or something in my head to start spinning. But yeah, I do know that when I come home and I walk in through those doors, I do know that it's very important. The first thing that I do is I greet my wife. I don't look at what's not done or what has to be done. I have to greet her, because if I greet her, I can't pay attention to everything else that's not done. And once I greet her, it's kind of like an icebreaker. You greet her, you tell you love her, how's your day been? How's your day been? So on and so forth. And then you just go about pitching in where you need to pitch in. But if I go in the house and I don't greet her and my focus is on the other things, then my greeting to her might be a little different, if that makes any sense.
So if there is a man listening or watching this our conversation right now, and the man feel unseen or overwhelmed by unmet expectation in his marriage and is ready to give up, what will you tell him? Or even if it is a woman?
Mm. One of my favorite scriptures is Galatians 6:9. Don't get weary in well doing, for ye shall reap if you don't give up and quit. Um, I think the world that we live in has made it very conducive and comfortable for us to quit and give up, because we instantly we've taken on this microwave mentality, and we've constantly, people don't pop popcorn over the stove now. They just stick it in the microwave and pop it. We've gotten so used and comfortable to instant gratification that it has created us to become numb to the realities of life, that that there are challenges, that I do have problems. I do have a problem. Not only do I have a problem, but she probably has a problem too. And that all it takes is a minor tweak, some minor tweaks, a few small tweaks, a minor discipline change. And that can revolutionize or change or impact your relationship forever. So many times people they get to the edge and they say, I'm done. When all it took was a minor tweak or a minor change or a minor adjustment in something to cause your perception to change, which would cause your heart to change and see things differently. But now these days, people say, well, we tried, it's not working. Let's call it quits. Our society has made it easy
Normalize it.
to quit. If we realize, the purpose and power of marriage is when God created Adam, and Adam realized that there were pairs of everything around him, but there was no one for himself. God put him to sleep, took a rib out of him, and created Eve. And that union is so powerful in that I feel like that's why the devil or the enemy fights so hard to create and cause divorce. And he uses our emotions and he uses our past experiences to bring up hurts and pains that when you get triggered a certain way, it causes you to respond a certain way. And the more he can trigger you, the more you respond a certain way. And if you're a husband or if you're a spouse and you said, I've just had enough of this, I'm done with it. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. Problems will go with us wherever we go. Whenever you bring two people together from two different backgrounds, from two different experiences, there's always going to be problems. And those problems may not surface during the dating phase.
Wow.
They may not surface. You may not see issues before you get married. And then all of a sudden you get married and you're like, who in the world is this woman I'm married to? Or who's this man I'm married to? Then all of a sudden stuff starts surfacing. You can work through it. You just got to be vulnerable and say, I need help.
Vulnerable and ask for
You
help.
got to ask for help.
You cannot, if you are not vulnerable and you are not asking for help, that means you are not ready to work on your marriage.
That's correct. If your marriage is struggling, you have to be vulnerable and say, you know what, we're struggling. We need some help. Why? It doesn't do you any good. And then if you have kids, the kids are impacted by this. So what you create today will either mean something tomorrow. Oh, it'll mean something tomorrow, but will it mean what you want it to mean tomorrow? And we, being created in the image of God, have the power to change that and direct that narrative.
Wow. On a last note, the Shawshank Redemption movie is one of your favorite movies. Jimmy, what is so special about this movie?
Man, I can watch Shawshank Redemption. I can watch Shawshank Redemption and Gladiator over and over and over again. Shawshank Redemption. Because you see a man who was falsely accused, put into prison. He has to go through that life, that prison life, and he crawls through 3 football field lengths of sewer, of people's waste, to get free. Like I said, everybody goes through something, and sometimes unjustly. But He kept the right head, and the Spirit showed him a way out, and he was able to escape. It wasn't pretty. It didn't smell good, but he got away. And so in that, and then all the people who treated him the way that they treated him, justice was served. Justice in that movie happened. And it's just the sight of seeing an underdog overcome. Because I think at some point in time in our lives, we're all underdogs. And the question is what are we doing to overcome? And I believe that we always have to look to the one from where our strength comes from.
On that note, thank you, Jimmy, for making the time. Jimmy, the landman in the house. Well, this has been a very interesting and passionate and exciting time. Thank you, Jimmy, once again.
Thank you, DJ.
Hopefully, we will get to have you and your wife on the set of The Voyage, because I'm dying to meet her and get to hear a side of the story that changed Jimmy. Thank you so much. If this conversation stayed with you, if something in it made you pause, that wasn't an accident. Sometimes you may not share the same story, but somewhere in this conversation, there is a mirror, a reminder that life is shaped not just by what we chase, but by what we are willing to surrender, by who we choose to be present for. If you are in a season of transition, if you are carrying questions without answers, know this: valleys don't disqualify you, they refine you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for choosing depth in a world that rushes past it. This is The Voyage, the trials, the transitions, and triumph. Until the next time, keep triumphing and keep building memories.